Good morning everyone, or rather good evening as you can see from the time of this service. And as that BR146 heads off, I'll say what we're going to do. So we're at Düren on the Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route with the Deutsche Bahn BR423 again, and this should be quite an interesting journey because we'll just be running an empty service from Düren to Aachen. So I remember in timetable mode that there's this one service a day that goes from where you can go along the whole Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route with a BR423 in place of the regular, I don't know, Talent 2 or ICE 3M perhaps. That screenshot noise was on quieter than I remember. Mind you, I suppose since I've gone and got things worked on in my ears, it's kind of significantly changed my perception of how loud and quiet things are. Anyway, so as I said, we're currently waiting at Düren for clearance to depart, and considering that, from what I remember, empty stock workings generally have very low priority, I'm not expecting this to be a particularly quick and easy journey. In fact, you can tell I'm just looking back along the route on this 2D map to try and work out if there's there's another train passing by. Well, approaching Düren, but that's still a few stations out. That looks like that's too long to be a passenger service, and it's showing there's two locomotives at the front, so that's obviously a freighter. These sound like car indicators. So I'm thinking I'll get the doors open in case, well, primarily to get as many passengers off as possible. One thing I do know about the railway, or railway operating practices, is that you generally don't have passengers on an empty stock working. So I'm a bit confused as to why it's scripted so that there's still loads of passengers on there. I suppose I'll take the units numbers. Unit 47 at the front and Unit 7 behind. Because when I look at the numbers for German units, I don't necessarily write down individual coach numbers. Like in this case, in the case of the lead coach, it would be, what does it say, 423047-8, and the other one was 423547. But I just use the common number, which of course is 47. So going by that logic, this lead unit is number 47, and the one in the back is just number 7. But yeah, it really doesn't make any sense as to why there would still be passengers on board. I suppose if none of them gets off, we'll just have to roll with it, I guess. So I seem to recall it was a bit of a somewhat common criticism back in the train simulator days, where you would often get scenarios where you're driving an empty service, but there was still loads of passengers on the train. And yeah, I remember a lot of people got a bit annoyed about that, and frankly I don't blame them. It's certainly not very realistic. Right, now I'm guessing that once this freight service passes by, we'll have to be essentially following behind it all the way to Aachen. And I think the next time I do a video with the BR423, it'll be sort of continuing from this particular run, and that will be me driving that strange early morning S19 service from Aachen all the way to Köln. I do apologise for that slightly awkward interruption. Couldn't help it, I'm afraid. Must say, I do quite like how Dovetail have implemented working destination displays on a lot of these routes. Although I can't understand why they still haven't done the same for the likes of Great Western Express and what's another one? Well, I suppose Ruhr-Sieg Nord. That's another route that lacks working destination displays, despite other routes having them. So I don't know why there's that inconsistency when it just seems rather unnecessary. Now I find it a little odd that Dovetail scripted this service so that it would be starting at 2:22 in the evening. No, sorry, 8:22 in the evening, and yet it's now set up so that you're just sitting here for ages, waiting for this freight service to turn up. Although I just thought if you got this new journeys pack but didn't have like Main-Spessart or Rhein-Ruhr Osten, you might not even get the freight service loaded in, because of course no, of course I don't give up control. Obviously this Köln to Aachen route only comes with the Talent 2 and ICE 3M, and because the Talent 2's RE9 service is only hourly in each direction, and the ICE 3M is every 2 hours, then the route is, I mean, even now it's still unrealistically quiet, but it wasn't as bad as it was when it was just the Talent 2 and ICE 3M. Where's this blasted freight train? It's taking its time. It's going past that last intermediate station. Right, well, speaking of stations, this one that we're currently at is the normal terminus for the S19 service. So for the life of me, I can't understand why there's this one a day, like very early in the morning, that starts out from Aachen instead. And I mean, it could just be like a
Bitte achten Sie auf den Abstand zwischen Zug und Bahnsteigkante.
It kind of reminds me of like the parliamentary trains in the UK. You know, like where instead of going through a proper tedious legal process to officially close a station or a certain line, they run one or like maybe two services a day, or sometimes even once a week, over these lines, over these sort of awkward lines. And the trains themselves also run at very awkward times over these obscure routes. Or in some cases, you could have a station on a line that does get a regular service, like say, I guess Teesside Airport, before they stopped running, before that service was suspended, where you had the main service over that route was the one from Darlington to Middlesbrough and Saltburn. But then you also had I think it was like 1 or 2 trains a week. There's an old turntable there. It's very strange. I wonder why this is here when there's no way of accessing it. Is this how it is? Does the real Düren station still have an old turntable? I'd be pleasantly surprised if it did. Anyway, as I was saying, so Teesside Airport was a station that eventually ended up with just the parliamentary service of like once a day, once or twice a week, and so that's a case of like a specific station where it's on a line that is otherwise busy, but for whatever reason the station itself has such bad passenger numbers that rather than closing it, they just run that service at somewhat awkward times. And the long-awaited freight train, that was a pair of BR145/2 locomotives from Main-Spessart Bahn. What's curious is that on the MSB route, the track run sounds don't work properly. Like, you know, all that extra noise you get when the train is rushing past, besides the wind noise. For some reason on Main-Spessart Bahn that inexplicably cuts out for most of the time that the train is moving past. And for the life of me, I can't understand why that's the case on just that one route, and yet it doesn't seem to be the case for anything more recent. Spotlight. I wonder if that's meant to be just like a clipboard light. Although that would be a bit of a silly place to put a clipboard as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, as I was saying, regarding like particular services at awkward times, I wonder if that sort of rule is in place for the S19. But even then, it still doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because, well, for the simple reason that obviously there is a passenger service already running over the section between Düren and Aachen, and that is of course I think it's RE1 and it would be RE4 and RE9. Because the RE4 is the service that goes through to Dortmund, and in TSW at least that service is represented by locomotive hauled coaches. But then you've also got the RE9, which I think goes to Hagen, and that's the one that the Talent 2s operate. Well, it seems that despite me having the doors open for quite a while, no one bothered to get off the train. Hello, there's something else coming along. Wasn't aware about this lot. That's another pair of BR185s. Oh, there's the wagon sounds cutting out for some reason. So that must be purely MSB rolling stock. I don't know. And you would have thought that Dovetail would have actually bothered to fix it, but clearly not. But evidently not. Because apparently it's not very high on that's if it even is on their list of priorities in the first place. Right, now where is that other freight service that was going west? Surely that would have been further ahead like this. Wait, so there's another green. That's where I can see another green signal. So, what's the bet that we're going to have to wait for yet another train to pass by before we can finally get moving? That looks like another pair of BR423s that's stuck there waiting for us. Yep, there's another train. Although that'll be. What's the bet? That'll be bloody RE4 stop. That it's actually going to stop here. Just quickly run across and check the destination display, or not the destination display, the departure board. Start the Talent to take over the scenario, especially since I'm not driving a Talent 2 today. Right, where do we need to be looking? There it is. Yep. Oh, of course. RE4 stopping in Aachen RE4 to Aachen, stopping here at 2036. I mean, I know that ECS movements generally have very low priority, but this is ridiculous. Well, it does look like this RE4 will be the last service we'll have to wait for before we can finally get on the move ourselves. Let's have a look. Just have a look at them anyway. Yes, I do apologise for this rather boring start to the video, but in all honesty, I was not expecting us to be waiting this long before we got moving. As per usual, it's one of the BR146.2s with the regular doppelstock valet coaches. And seeing it doppelstock concerts this long is pleasantly surprising, because at this point I'm so used to driving on like Nahverkehr, Dresden and Toronto Ramp that I'm actually more familiar with seeing like 2-car Doppelstockwagen consists, or 4-car if you're on S1. Yes, I think this sort of consist where it's 6 coaches instead, that is generally what you would see on like Main-Spessart Bahn. Mind you, of course, the coaches in Dresden have different decals, such as like the S-Bahn logo. I think in some cases they also have VVO logos, despite me not really knowing exactly what VVO is. Right. I think I'll run back to the engine, run back to our train now. The doors are shut, so yeah, off they go. Oh wait, yeah, so that one will be stopping at some of the other stations, so we'll probably end up, when we finally get the road, we'll probably end up having to go quite slowly in order to keep in line with the yellow and red signals. I think from memory that procedure in the UK at least is called chasing yellows. And I seem to recall one of the tricks, well, it's not really a trick, but one thing you can do when you're like chasing yellows is you drive, like potentially if you end up coming up to a red signal, you slow down to an absolute crawl, or in the hope that the signal will go to yellow, or probably not green, but in the hope that the signal will clear before you come to a complete stop. And then, of course, if you're getting too close to the signal and it hasn't changed, then you just bring the train to a complete stop. Bloody hell, I think we've been going for nearly 18 minutes at this point, and now we've finally got the road. It's saying that we've just got one instruction for this service, which is obviously stop in the depot in Aachen. So theoretically this will be a non-stop run, but as we've just seen, we'll probably end up having to be following cautionary signals just about the whole way. But either way, this is certainly quite strange to be driving an S-Bahn unit on a section of track that normally doesn't get any S-Bahn services. Wait, did I open the... That's the other thing, I haven't got, because this is technically supposed to be an empty stock working, I haven't switched the interior lights on. Obviously when you're driving this thing in normal service, you're meant to have the interior lights on, and that's throughout the whole day, not just at night. From memory, this thing can easily do 120 kilometers an hour, but generally I haven't had the opportunity to get it past 120, so I'll give that a shot tonight. Well, it's obviously night time in the game, but as I'm recording this in real life, it is relatively early in the morning. Normally when you're driving this thing on the S-Bahn service in and out of Köln and of course München, generally the speed limit only goes as high as 120 kilometers an hour. And even then, in a lot of cases, especially in München, you still can't get the train up to 120 before you have to slow down for the next station. Sometimes they're that close together. At least this train's got pretty decent brakes. Okay, so it's got some green already. Well, as you were just saying, I did just manage to get this thing to go faster than 120. So you'd certainly be cutting it fine if you tried pushing it to 160 on a normal S-Bahn service. Although some might even say you're out of your mind. Off to the left there, that looks like we're passing a football ground. Football pitch at the very least. Doesn't surprise me though, because I know enough about football to know that it's an incredibly popular sport all around the world. In Germany it's no exception. There's a light over there. Looks like some sort of radio mast. It's either that or floodlights. Actually, I can't really tell what that mast is for. Actually, I'm trying to think, I'm surprised how much of the scenery you can still see, even though it's very dark. And I found that if I keep the train's speed at around 120 kilometers an hour, then we shouldn't get any yellow signals. There's a pair of Talent 2s going back towards Köln. Speaking of which, I did a video about the Talent 2 yesterday and the day before that. And if I remember to do so, I'll put a link to one of them in the top right corner. Obviously you can't link two videos in the same card. So easily, I've just remembered that as we come into Aachen, or approach Aachen Hauptbahnhof, we go over quite a nice viaduct. Which, what we're going along now kind of looks like a viaduct. Probably an artificial embankment if that's even such a thing. Okay, I'm not sure what this 80k speed limit is for, unless that's like a diversion into, like, off the main line and onto a loop for a platform. I'd be surprised if we were if we ever get allowed to overtake that RE4 service. At least I think it was RE4. Taking any chances this time. So, in TSW at least, you don't get the option to set it up so that you can still keep playing even after you pass a red signal. Whereas that you do have that option in Train Simulator. So I'm not sure why Dovetail got rid of it in this supposedly advanced sequel. Well, it's not really a sequel, but it's a successor, I suppose. Yes, I've had enough experiences with these red signals to know how frustrating it is when you go past them, because if you do go past a red signal, then that just throws you out of the game. You don't get a chance to really, I don't know if save yourself is the right way to put it. Generally I don't save the game because I've found that most of the time I can do it all in one take, essentially. Now that reddish-orange thing in the distance, like whatever that is, it's really thrown me for a loop because, yeah, that thing there, I don't know if you can see that, but to me that's looking like another train, but I don't think it is. Speaking of other trains, yeah, there's the RE4 heading off. And look, yeah, so it looks like we're being diverted through the, well, not diverted, but sent through on the main line. Okay, I'm surprised that button making the clicking noise is still going on even when we're not in service. Aside from that ridiculously long wait at Düren before we finally got the all clear to move, I'm actually quite enjoying this one. Because as I said earlier, it's just so weird being able to drive this unit on a section that's not normally used by S-Bahn trains. And as I seem to recall saying at least, next time I drive the BR423, I'll try to. It's not very realistic being able to open the door while the train is moving. Actually, what's the station? That's curious. There's anti-pigeon spikes on the destination display. Well, on the departure screen. This is one that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. What was I just saying? Yeah, I do recall saying earlier that it should be quite interesting, because next time I drive the BR423 I'm hoping to, well, it'll probably be that unusual passenger service from Aachen to Köln. Because I was actually looking through the, because I was initially going to do that service for this video, but then I was looking through the list of services in Timetable Mode, and then noticed that late in the evening there was this S19 from Düren. Well, it's like an empty service from Düren that goes out to Aachen, which makes sense because it's like, how else could you get a train to Aachen to start or to run that service early in the morning? When, as I said, that is the only, this early morning S19 service is the only one that covers the full Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route. So there's not like, there's no westbound service, or there's no westbound S-Bahn service to Aachen. So I wonder if this whole operation where you have to run the service out early or late in the evening and then come back early in the morning, wondering if that's got anything to do with the similar operations of parliamentary trains. I've just realised that generally the only other service that you can run along here that's non-stop is actually the ICE3M. Because curiously, when it runs that service from, I think it's Frankfurt to Brussels, when it's passing along this section it doesn't stop at any intermediate stations, only at Aachen and Köln, which in some ways is impressive, but when from a driving perspective, given how short this road is, it is quite disappointing. So in some ways I'd say your best bet, or your better option would be to drive the Talent 2 if you're after a service that has a lot more to do with a lot more intermediate, or with actual intermediate stops, instead of just going non-stop the whole time. This looks like a disused station that I've noticed before, but I've got no idea what that station's name is. I seem to recall there was another disused station somewhere along here, but maybe that was it, and there is only one disused station. Either way, it reminds me of, I think it's somewhere along the München to Garmisch-Partenkirchen route in Train Simulator, like on that section where you're winding your way up through the hills after going through Starnberg, and you're about to go into the proper outskirts of München. I think we go through at least one disused station, which is quite curious. So most of the German routes that I've driven on, in CSW at least, they don't have any disused stations. Although I suppose if you were going along Dresden to Chemnitz, some of the stations along there look like they're disused, even though they're still open. That's not a criticism, I should add. It's just generally pointing out the way I see it. Well, it's like the Split End song, I See Red. So yeah, there's that. I think that's the same consist that we saw back in Düren. So what's the bet? This will start moving, this lot will start moving before we can pull up at the signal, potentially get a screenshot of the 423 alongside the 146, and the bastard's already moving. Wonderful. Actually that's pointless to get a screenshot from here at the very least. Now I would assume the reason why the passenger service is going in front is presumably to make sure they don't run late. Although I'm not sure how an empty service going in front would potentially compromise the punctuality of the passenger service, but what do I know? Well, not very much, evidently. I guess we'll just have to stop at this signal and wait probably about a minute until it goes to, well, not to green. If anything, it'll probably just go to yellow. Looks like a missing collectible I've just noticed on this other platform, so I'll just nip across and find that. I realise that this sort of thing is not everyone's cup of tea, but for me it's, I don't know why, I've always liked going and hunting down those strange collectible things, even though kind of like the pointless action points doesn't really add a lot to the, or doesn't really add much, if anything, to the overall gameplay experience. Realised I haven't checked to see what station this is. It is Eschweiler Hauptbahnhof. Okay, I wonder where the other stations in Eschweiler are. If there's enough of the, if there's enough of them to have one labelled as a central station. Nope, the signal's green. Let's hurry back to our train. God's sake. That's a complete brain fade of me accidentally opening the doors. You'd certainly never want to do that, of course, if you were out on the open line and stopped at a signal. Just so the drivers would probably be trained to avoid making that sort of mistake. Anyone will floor it out of Eschweiler Hauptbahnhof. Oh no, there's a tunnel. I forgot that there were tunnels on this route. Mind you, it's probably because there are no tunnels at all between Düren and Köln. Which, incidentally, that's basically the first half of the route, and the only section where you can get the ICE-3M up to like a proper high speed, about 250 kilometers an hour, which is quite impressive, even though that's still nowhere near the top speed of an ICE-3M. I think those things can easily do like 300 kilometers an hour. And I find that very hard to believe, if I'm honest. Especially when I've heard people say that when you're on one of these really pretty fast trains, obviously, so when you're in the coach and you look out the window, it just does not feel like you're going anywhere near as fast as you actually are. You don't really have that sort of experience when you're on more conventional trains, just like the S-Bahn. So, for all I know, there probably could be some people who think that way even when they are on the S-Bahn. In fact, I remember towards the end of the 1820s when public railways were first starting up. I think there were fears back then of people's heads potentially going bang. Because they thought that that people's bodies wouldn't be able to handle going as fast as like 15 or 30 miles an hour. And suffice to say that these people were completely and utterly wrong. God. I think I've got this one. This is honestly unnerving. Not initially thinking that you were going to stop in time for this signal. Although red train, red signal, I suppose that combination. Oh, for God's sake! Silly thing. Clearing almost as soon as I was about to get a screenshot of the train looking at the red signal. There's a very noticeable loop with that horn. I'll blast it again to see if you can hear it for yourself. Although I do hope that at the very least this horn sound is prototypical. It's curious, the loop isn't as noticeable when you're in the external view. Just a minute. Hold on, I swear that's another red, unless that's a bit of the station building there, because that must be part of the station building, or not the building, but like supports for either a lift or stairs, because that really did confuse me and I thought that was another train, even though the signals are telling me otherwise. This, I think this station is Schnellfahrstrecke Köln Hauptbahnhof. I don't know what that building there is, that one in the different shades of green. Either way, we must press on. Let's get this lot to Aachen. So I'm thinking that, so yeah, I remember that the depot is just past the main station, so we'll actually go through it this time instead of stopping near one of the platforms and ending our run. So I just realised I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see an ICE 3M at all as we go along on this run, especially since we haven't got that far to go. I must say this is another reason why I think this is a bit of an unusual yet fascinating run, for me at least, is that I'm just not used to driving nighttime services or scenarios on TSW2. As you will have seen from most of my other videos, the vast majority of the time I play this game I usually go for a daytime service. But of course in real life I think drivers are expected to be able to drive at all times of the day, essentially. Especially when for freight trains at least, or freight services, especially around my way, they're generally like a 24-hour operation. What I mean is obviously is that there's no, like in the case of the Kiwi Rail freight services around my way, there's no like long periods where they're running, there's no like long gaps of several hours where they're not running any trains. So I think they do that on some of the London Underground lines. Although what's this lot coming towards us? That is, no, it's another set of double-stop Wagen coaches with another BR146. So I'm guessing that lot will be an RE4 service going to Dortmund. Now this station we're coming up, we can see in the distance there. I could have sworn this is one that you see, that you go past, but you never stop at. So I'm wondering if that early morning S-Bahn service that we'll be doing soon will actually stop here. Because there's nothing on there's not showing anything on the destination, or on these departure screens. What is that, Eilendorf? Okay, I'm really confused because I could have sworn I have stopped at that station before. Well, it could be like Essen-Kreis Süd, which is a station on Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr. That's a curious one where it's on that line that the fast, like RE11 service and the freight trains take to avoid the slower S-Bahn route. And speaking of freight services, oh no, that's not freight, that's BR101 with intercity coaches. Because I think from a distance, I mean, okay, 2 BR101s. When I thought, and that's the other thing, yeah, Dovetail, why is there no cab car with the BR101? Like, that's something that I think a lot of people have been asking, and I don't think we've ever really got a solid answer. From what I gather, in real life, the BR101s do indeed run with cab cars. So, for the life of me, I cannot understand why Dovetail decided not to bother, or decided to acknowledge the existence of the BR101's cab car by not bothering to include it. Now I'm slowing down to an absolute crawl here because I want to try and get a screenshot of the BR423s here passing this slightly unusual sight of all these engines in the sidings. Because I've never noticed that these sidings were here until just now. But that's clearly a BR143 and, hello, 425. Speaking of Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr, because the 425 of course comes with that route. Okay, why are the textures all glitchy on the coupler. Never mind. Yeah, for the life... I've been driving along this route for a long time. Well, quite a few times since it was released. And I've never, ever noticed this siding. Or these sidings. Incidentally, I just realised it sounded like I said sardines. Speaking of which, I don't like sardines, let alone any fish that you can get in a tin. And like a blue E2 with a face and the number 1, I generally just don't like the smell of fish. And yet I can still scoff down sushi if I can afford it. Well, not if I can afford it, but when I decide to buy it. If anyone knows more about that site, this yard and what it's called, please do comment below. Because I'm quite curious, I'm quite eager to learn more about German railways, considering how many times I feature them in these silly videos. But I know that we're getting pretty close to another station. As I was about to say, we're coming up on another station, which is Aachen Hauptbahnhof, and this is the last intermediate stop before Aachen Hauptbahnhof. And I remember that when I was doing that Talent 2 comparison video, I did shoot a scene of a pair of units arriving at and departing from Aachen Hauptbahnhof. And considering we're very close to the Hauptbahnhof, I don't think I'll bother going crazy fast anymore. Especially when you can see there the speed limit going down to 70 kilometers an hour. Now I'm thinking I'll try to get at least one more video done this morning, like on the morning of March 9th as I'm recording this. Because I also intend to go out early this afternoon to watch a couple of Kiwi rail services. Just have to see how things go, I suppose. I've been noticing that recently that the videos I've done about New Zealand railways in real life have done better than I was expecting, so I'm thinking I might try doing more of them, as long as I can think of good ideas, which in my case is a bit difficult. Okay, so yeah, this is that nice viaduct I was on about, because I remember quite a fair way back down the line I did bring this up. This is another one where I've forgotten its name, incidentally, but it's certainly a nice scene to go across such a fancy looking structure just outside the town's main station. And as an aside, one thing I've just remembered about Aachen is that whilst I don't know too much about the town itself, I do know that it's actually very, very close to the border with, I think it's either Brussels or the Netherlands. Indeed, as I said earlier, the ICE3M, well, when you see it along here, it runs the service from Frankfurt Main to Brussels. This is quite curious, because I wasn't expecting there to be any engines in the sidings here, but no, this one here is the MRCE BR185/5 from Rhein-Ruhr Osten. You can also get the 185/5 with Nahverkehr to Dresden. Here's the red BR185 from... This will either be the version from Riesa Nord or Main-Spessart Bahn. If I remember, I have featured the BR185 in a video before, like on this very same route. And again, if I remember, I'll put a link to it in the top right. Because on that occasion, I just did a pretty basic freight run from here in Aachen to Köln-Ehrenfeld. Eventually, I can hear an emergency siren. Not in real life. Hang about. What's that BR363 doing here? Hold on. I'm just wiping my nose after sneezing a couple of times. Yes, this is very strange, because I'm pretty sure there's no timetable mode services where you can actually drive on this route at least. I'm pretty sure there's no timetable mode services where you can actually drive the BR363. Unless there is, and unless there are some, and I'm just not aware of it. As for why I brought this train to a stop again, I've got no idea. Anyway, I suppose it'll be interesting to get a shot of her. Aachen Hauptbahnhof. I always like these stations that have got these big fancy overall roofs, or I think they sometimes call them train sheds. There's a couple of other stations throughout Germany that I remember that have got similar designs, and those two are Hagen Hauptbahnhof and Bonn Hauptbahnhof. Incidentally, Bonn is another station that you can get to by getting a train from Köln. Bonn is on the line down towards Koblenz, and actually, come to think of it, continues past Koblenz and all the way onto Frankfurt. So you've actually got, I've just realised, you've got that whole Köln to Frankfurt section in Train Simulator, even though it's split in two physically separate route add-ons at Koblenz. I remember I did manage to do a run record a whole run from Köln to Koblenz, but I didn't particularly enjoy it because it was using the Train Simulator version of the Doppelstockwagen coaches with a BR146/0 locomotive, and the reason why I didn't enjoy it is because of the severely limited functionality of the Doppelstockwagen cab car in comparison to the TSW2 version. Anyway, at last we're arriving in the yard at Aachen. And so there's a regular Talent 2s and another 146 for company. Just looking up at the wires to make sure that they're still there, because in at least one case, particularly Hauptstrecke München to Augsburg, for some reason Dovetail forgot to model in the overhead wires. This really hasn't gone too bad. Mind you, I suppose it's not like there could be that much to go wrong, because we were just driving an empty service with no scheduled intermediate stops. I suppose we'll get out for sort of a very crude and poorly thought out conclusion. That's not a good angle. So yes, now that despite that very long wait at Düren before we got moving, and how much time that took up, I do hope that you've enjoyed this unique journey with the Deutsche Bahn BR423, and if you'd like to see, and make sure to stick around if you'd like to see the video where I drive this lot from Aachen all the way to Köln, because it should be quite interesting, since it's the only opportunity you'll get to see this unit over the whole route. But yeah, for now I think I'll just say thank you very much for watching. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time.